All right, normally on Locked On Longhorns, what happens is we start with a cold open, right? That cold open consists of me teasing the first segment, playing a video, and then starting the show. Well, in preparation for today's episode, I accidentally deleted the video somehow off my feed, and I do not feel like spending the requisite time it would take to go find that video and re-upload it. I'm in record mode right now. So what we're going to do is, in the spirit of having fun, I'm going to do a manual cold open, and then we're going to start today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Here we go. So On3 released their top 100 players in college football heading into the 2023 season, and 4 Texas Longhorns made the list. You are watching Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are talking about On3's top 100 players in college football for the 2023 season. 4 Texas Longhorns made the list. We discussed them. Plus, were there any snubs from this Texas football team? We discussed that as well. Then the Texas basketball team, Ronnie Terry and his staff got really good news yesterday. Tyrese Hunter has withdrawn his name from NBA considerations and will return to college for his third year, his second year at the 40 acres. What does that mean for the basketball team? Then we're talking about the Texas baseball team, who started a crucial weekend series against West Virginia, got the first win 12-2, looking to clinch the series tonight in game 2. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, if you've seen any episode of Locked On Longhorns before on YouTube, if you're familiar with the video I referenced earlier, I need you to hop in the comments and critique my cold open, right? Criticize me, compliment me, whatever you need to do, let me know, right? If this is your first time ever watching Locked On Longhorns or listening on audio, welcome. I'm glad to have you. I promise I'm not as crazy as what you just heard in the first 2 minutes, even though I know that was a hell of an introduction to the podcast. But like I said, welcome. I'm glad to have you, period. If you listened one time, if you've listened 100 times, thanks for listening today. So if you've listened over the last month, you know that we've done a lot of content regarding On3's top 10 positional rankings list, right? From quarterbacks to running backs to, tight ends, offensive tackles, linebackers, defensive line, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. They've done all kind of lists to help us get prepared and get excited for the 2023 college football season. Well, I guess yesterday marked 100 days left until the college football season starts, and that's why they released their On3 top 100 players in college football. And it was cool to look at this list and see how it kind of coincided and compared to some of their top 10 position rankings lists. Like, for example, Kelvin Banks was their 6th best offensive tackle, returning on their top 10 tackles list. He was also the 6th highest rated offensive tackle on their top 100 list. That checked out. A little bit of difference was when Jalen Ford came in as the 7th best linebacker, according to On3, returning in their top 10 list, but they had 7 linebackers ranked ahead of him on the On3 top 100. So like I said, it was cool to compare those lists and, kind of see where they compared and where they contrasted, right? And when you look at this Texas roster, I think it's a hell of an accomplishment and a hell of a nod to have 4 players on the top 100 in college football, because there's 131 FBS teams. So to have 4 players in the top 100 when there's 131 teams overall, I think it speaks to the talent on this roster. And, people that matter know that know that this roster is really talented. Urban Meyer jumped off the porch a little bit. He's crazy. I take whatever he says with a grain of salt. It says this is the best roster in college football. I wouldn't go there, but I think we would all agree that, this is probably the most talented roster we've seen at the 40 acres in a long time. I think it's crazy to say that, based on losing 5 players to the NFL draft, players to the transfer portal, and even more to the NFL. But I think that's the case. And I think that this is this is the most talented roster that Steve Sarkisian has had to work with since he took the job in 2021. I think it's time for Texas to get back into that Big 12 championship conversation. I think it's time for Texas to get back into that double-digit win conversation. And eventually, it's time for Texas to get back into that college football playoff conversation. And I think this roster, this team, this year will go a long way to deciding the future trajectory of this Texas football team. And I think the 4 players on this On3 Top 100 will be 4 of the biggest reasons while Texas achieves the lofty expectations they have this year for the first time in a while. So the first Texas Longhorn that came in on this list, I guess I should say the number 1 player on the list, if you care, is Caleb Williams, of course, returning Heisman winner. The number 21 player and the first Texas Longhorn on this list is Xavier Worthy. Now, he came in as the number 2 receiver behind Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think was 3rd overall on the list. Xavier Worthy was number 21 overall, the number 2 receiver. Now, Emeka Egbuka was at 22, so he's right there at Xavier Worthy. That's kind of a pick 'em. Romeo Odunze, I think he was down at like 28. Right. So you can make an argument on who's the second best receiver in college football. I think Xavier Worthy has more game breaking ability than those two. I think he has more ability to take the game over and dominate a game than Emeka Egbuka behind Marvin Harrison Jr. and then Romeo Odunze, even though he was really good last year with Michael Penix Jr. going over 1,000 yards. And I know that what Xavier Worthy did last year was a little bit disappointing for Texas fans based on what we saw his freshman year. But, I'm not sure that the quarterback play improved from 2021 to 2022, especially in the fashion that we thought it would. Also, he was dealing with a broken hand for the last half of the season, and he still had a really good year. I thought that, he dropped 3 or 4 touchdowns that could have made his stat line look even better. But when you look at what he's done for the last 2 seasons, he has 122 catches, 1,741 yards, 14 yards per reception, and 22 total touchdowns in 25 games. That includes the passing touchdown he had against West Virginia. And I think based on his ability, based on what we saw in 2021 and based on what we expect from this Texas offense this year, there's no question in my mind that if we get peak Xavier Worthy in a peak Steve Sarkisian offense, he definitely will be one of the 21 best players in college football this year. So I love where they have him in the ranking. And I think if he would have had a year similar to his freshman year last year, he probably would have came in the top 10. But him being at 21 is more than fair. I think he plays like a top 15 to 10 player in college football this year. The second Texas Longhorn on the list is Kelvin Banks. He was the number 6 offensive tackle, the number 51 player overall. And I think this is a great ranking for a true freshman. To my knowledge, he was the second highest true freshman on the list behind Harold Perkins, who came in the top 5 to 6, I think. So, Harold Perkins was a different type of dominant, but Kelvin Banks was really good last year. And he's somebody that was exceptional in terms of pass blocking, and he more than held his own in terms of run blocking. For him to be a lot better this year, I think that's where he needs to improve his run blocking. He had a 65 run blocking grade last year, which is good. It's not great. It's not elite. When you're talking about the elite tackles in college football, they do it on both ends, right? And I think he was a lot better in pass protection last year than he was in terms of the run game. But, that's where left tackles make kind of their money in terms of pass protection. And when you look at what he was able to do last year as a true freshman, he had an 80+ pass blocking grade, according to PFF. That's elite against 3 top 15 picks, and Will Anderson, Will McDonald, and Tyree Wilson. So Kelvin Banks was really good last year, and I think if he improves his run blocking, which I think he should, I think he'll be a lot better than he was last year just because it'll be his second year in college football. Then you're talking about somebody who will be top 20 to 25 in those rankings next year. And the highest tackle was rated at 8. So I could even see Kelvin Banks being a top 15 player if he improves on what he did this season, his true freshman season. Quinn Ewers came in at 75th, the number 7 quarterback, and I love this ranking. I think too often when they rank players, we can conflate their draft status, right, and their draft potential with what we've actually seen in college football. I saw a list from CBS Sports the other day that said that Quinn Ewers was the 3rd best quarterback returning this college football season. And I said, there's no way that Quinn Ewers is the 3rd best quarterback in college football based on what we saw last year. Now, if you want to say Quinn Ewers is the 3rd best quarterback in terms of draft potential in college football this year, then you can definitely make that argument behind Drake May and Caleb Williams, but not the 3rd best in terms of production. I think this list with Quinn Ewers being at number 75 and the number 7 quarterback on the list is perfect, because I think based on what he did last year, I'm not even sure you would put him as the number 7 quarterback, but I think this also speaks to the talent he has and what we expect from Quinn Ewers this year. So the 6 quarterbacks ahead of him are Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix Jr., Sam Hartman, and Bo Nix. I would not argue about any of them being better than Quinn Ewers. J.J. McCarthy is at number 7. I would take Quinn Ewers over J.J. McCarthy, but we know that team success is a part of quarterback success. You can't argue with him taking them to the college football playoff. So, I think this is the perfect ranking for Quinn Ewers. Like I said, number 7 quarterback in the country, even though he's more talented than that, and the number 75 player in the country, even though he's more talented than that. And he has the ability, I think, if he has a year like Mac Jones did in 2020, to be one of the 10 to 15 best players in college football this year. And if you looked at what he did against Alabama, Oklahoma, and Washington last year, when he looked like he was living up to that recruiting ranking, he was 61 for 90, 792 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception in 8 quarters of football, right? He didn't play 4 quarters between Oklahoma and Alabama. So that was Quinn Ewers at his best last year. If he repeats that or improves on it like we think that he will, then he will be one of the 3 to 4 best quarterbacks in college football. And this number 75 ranking will look horrible at the end of the season. And then coming in at number 86, the last Texas Longhorn on the list, A.D. Mitchell, the number 11 receiver. And I think this is the perfect ranking for him as well, because we know his potential and we know what he can do in this Texas offense this year, but we have yet to see it in a large capacity or a large sample size from A.D. Mitchell. Now, we know he's one of the biggest game-breaking receivers in college football, as evidenced by 4 touchdowns in 4 college football playoff games, right? But the problem why you would have him at number 86 and say he has a lot to show us, or he still has a lot to prove, even though he has 2 national championships and 4 touchdowns in those 4 college football playoff games, is because when he was at Georgia, there was a possible 30 games he could have played in. He only played in 16 of them. That's barely over 50%. And his career high is 77 receiving yards. JT Sanders and Jordan Whittington both had games last year of over 77 receiving yards. So you're talking about somebody who has been dominant in the college football playoff, but has missed almost 50% of their games and has never had 100 receiving yard game in college football. I think that's a big reason why he's number 86 on the list, but knowing what he has the potential to do in Sark's offense opposite of Xavier Worthy is also the reason why you would have him as 86 on the list, given the time missed and the lack of production in the regular season. Now, talking about some potential snubs, you could say that JT Sanders is one of the best tight ends in the country. He's potentially a top 100 player in the country, but there were only 2 tight ends on the list. I can't even remember who the second one was. Obviously, he's not better than Brock Bowers. I think he was the 3rd player overall on the list, so I'm fine with that. Also, it's a top 100 list, period, so it has to be somewhat exclusive, right? Everybody can't make a top 100 list. I think Jalen Ford is the biggest snub candidate from the Texas roster, and I don't even think that he got snubbed. So 7 linebackers made the list, so I think if it was a top 125 or top 150, you would have Jalen Ford on there. His numbers were ridiculous last year: 119 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 interceptions. And I think a few of those plays were game-ending plays to secure the win for Texas. So I think if anybody got snubbed, it was Jalen Ford. I think if it was a top 125, he would be on there comfortably. But it's a top 100 list. It should be exclusive. So I'm not necessarily comfortable saying Jalen Ford got snubbed. He's just the biggest snub, if there was one, on the Texas roster. So 4 players on On3's top 100 for this Texas football team. Really big expectations for the Texas football team this season. And let's hope at the end of the season, we're saying they met or exceeded those expectations. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we're talking about Tyrese Hunter returning for the Texas basketball team for at least 1 more year. Birddogs. I love Birddogs. I love wearing shorts, and it is time to wear shorts. You know how hot it is outside. You can't even get in your car without breaking a sweat. It is that time of the year in the state of Texas, so you need to go out more and wear a little bit less, and that's why I'm wearing Birddogs almost everywhere I go. And 3 reasons I'm putting on the Birddogs is fit. 1, I look better and I feel great wearing Birddogs. I may have them on right now. That's why this podcast is so good, right? look good. Feel good. The second thing is comfort. Their stretchy fabric makes my legs look great. And you know I love my legs looking great, and they're comfier than all my other shorts and pants. That's why I'm washing my Birddogs every 2 days, so I can wear them every 2 days. And it gives me the versatility, right? Wherever I want to wear them. If it's a meeting, a date, hanging out with friends, or just sitting on the couch watching my Texas Longhorns, I love having my Birddogs on. And now You could dress like me if you go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code lockedoncollege. They'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege right now so you can look and feel like the best. All right, Tyrese Hunter entered the NBA draft. I think that was kind of a foregone conclusion when he came to the University of Texas, that he was looking for increased development and increased chance to win at the college level. I think based on what we had last year, maybe increased NIL opportunities. I don't blame the brother for that. But, it was pretty consensus that he was looking to enter the NBA draft, right, after 1 year. And he entered the NBA draft process. And there was always talk that it was probably exploratory and he was better off coming back to the University of Texas for another year. But you never know what scouts and NBA evaluators are going to say, right? And I think that I'm not sure how much NBA draft potential he has, but he definitely did some good things for Texas last year. I think I was expecting more, but he definitely did some good things for Texas last year, specifically on the defensive end. Well, he put his name in the NBA draft combine, and I think quickly found out or he put his name in the NBA draft, I should say, and quickly found out what NBA evaluators and scouts think about him, because he did not get an invite to the NBA draft combine or the G League elite camp. I think 124 total prospects or 123 total prospects were invited, right? Like Victor Wembanyama is going to get drafted, but he didn't go. But I think 124 total prospects went, and he didn't get an invite at all, right? So if there's 60 players getting drafted, probably maybe 20 to 30 outside of that are getting signed or invited to, the G League or the Summer League, right? That still leaves 34 players that are probably asked out. And if you don't get invited to one of these premier camps trying to go to the NBA, there's a good chance you need to come back to college. And so I said that when I saw the rosters about a week and a half ago, and he confirmed it yesterday that he will be back for another season at the 40 acres. And I thought that he was good last year, but he played timid. And I'm not sure if that's because he went from being the primary ball handler at Iowa State to playing more off ball to Marcus Carr. But that's going to be the case again this year, because you're playing off ball to, I think, somebody who's been better for the last 4 years than Marcus Carr and Max Amos, right? He's been one of the best scorers and playmakers in college basketball the last 4 to 5 years. So you're going to be playing in that off ball guard role again. But I think coming back as a leader on this team with Dylan Dessou, really, and Brock Cunningham, the only 3 players from last year's team that played heavy minutes, and just being in the second year in this system, right? You're going to have to be a leader on this team in terms of being a coach on the floor for Rodney Terry. And I think just being comfortable in a new spot, being in this situation for 2 years in a row, right? I think he'll be a lot better because he'll be a lot more comfortable, right? Even though he wasn't a true freshman, it was his true freshman year at Texas, right? Now in year 2 under Rodney Terry, everything they dealt with. I mean, he played his first 8 games under Chris Beard, right? He dealt with a lot. Now I expect him to be a lot better this year. But even when you looked at last year, he increased his shooting splits across the board. So he went from 39.1% from the floor to 39.4%. But the biggest jump and most key jump was from 27% from 3 to 34% from 3. I would like to see that 36% or higher this year. And then from the free throw line, he went from 68% at Iowa State to 80% this year. So I think he increased his shooting splits across the board. He has a chance to do that once again in his second year at the University of Texas. Even as timid as he looked, even in all of those games where it felt like Tyrese Hunter wasn't doing enough on the offensive end, or was kind of just standing there waiting to take a shot at the end of the shot clock, he still scored in double figures in 20 games. I was surprised when I counted up that tally. And he had games of 29 and 26 against Gonzaga and Kansas State. So I think we should see a lot more of that Tyrese Hunter this year. He's not going to average 29 or 26, of course, but I think he should have more than 2 outings where he scored 20 points, as opposed to what we saw last year. And I think really he kind of got his confidence back with that second Iowa State game. Because if you remember, after that second Iowa State game, he scored in double figures like 6 straight games, where he had only done it like 3 or 4 times in the previous 10 to 15 games, right? So I definitely think towards the end of the season, he played a lot better. And I think in terms of his defense, that's when he really turned it on and became one of the best perimeter defenders in college basketball. So 3 things I'm looking forward to seeing from Tyrese Hunter this year to improve on what we saw last year and to really take this Texas basketball team to the next level is attacking the rim a lot more, right? Ronnie Terry said he wants this team to play like that Miami team played last year, and he's done a really good job of improving and bringing back 3-point shooting to this basketball team. But he also wants guards he also wants guards that can put pressure on the defense by getting to the rim. And I think Tyrese Hunter has the athleticism to do that. We didn't see it a ton last year. He has to do that a lot this year. And good things happen when you attack the rim. You either get an easy basket, you get to the free throw line, or you're going to draw the defense and set up easy baskets for Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou down low. So I think he needs to be more aggressive on offense, period. That's even with the three-point shooting, right? He needs to be a big part of this offense. But I think the biggest part is going downhill, using that athleticism to get to the rim, and so many plays and so much action can happen off of that if you're aggressive. Improve your three-point shooting. Like I said, he went from 27% to 34%. If he can get to that 36, 37%, that's when you're talking about one of the best shooters in college basketball. I think he's more than capable. We saw that towards the end of the season. I also think he's going to get a lot of great open catch and shoot looks based on what Max Amos will do with the ball and in that pick and roll. So I think he'll have a lot of opportunities to get open threes, and I think he needs to shoot closer to 40% on his open threes, about 37% on threes overall for the season. And I think be more of a playmaker. He went from about 5 assists a game to 2.5 assists a game last year. A big reason for that is going from being the primary ball handler to being the off-ball ball handler next to Sir'Jabari Rice or Marcus Carr. I think that he can improve a little bit in the ball handling and playmaking this year, right? Max Amos, of course, is going to be the primary in both of those regards, but I think Tyrese Hunter can get back up to being that secondary playmaker, getting Dylan Dessou and Caden Shedrick involved, getting easy baskets for everybody else, and getting back up to that 3.5, 4 assist range. I think if Tyrese Hunter does all of that, attacks the rim more, is more aggressive on offense, improves his three-point shooting, and shows more of an ability to play make for others, we'll be looking at a better version of Tyrese Hunter and a better version of this Texas basketball team potentially than what we saw last year. And just talking about Ronnie Terry and the staff really quickly, they've done a good job based on the cards they were dealt, right? Obviously, this roster would look a lot better with A.J. Johnson and Ron Holland on it. I think this roster would probably be complete right now with Ron Holland and A.J. Johnson on it. But you lost them. You can't necessarily control that, right? Whether it was Ronnie Terry and his staff's fault or not, you can't necessarily control that. What you can control is bringing in one of the best transfer classes in the country. You did that, currently the top 3 class in the country in terms of the transfer portal rankings, and you can control trying to get players on this roster who still have eligibility to come back. And I think they did a really good job in that, in getting Dylan Dessou and Tyrese Hunter, 2 players who had extra eligibility, to come back and use that at the 40 acres for one more year. So like I said, of course, this roster would look a lot better with Ron Holland and A.J. Johnson on it. But given the circumstances, I think Ronnie Terry and his staff have done a great job filling out the roster. I think you'll see 2 to 3 more players from the portal on this roster before the season starts. And then we're talking about the Texas baseball team. They're in a very crucial weekend series right now with West Virginia because they have a slim chance to be tops in the Big 12 after this series. It is very slim, but it is a chance nonetheless. I think they need to sweep West Virginia, while I think Oklahoma needs to take 2 out of 3 from Oklahoma State. I'm not sure exactly what the formula is. Now, I know that Oklahoma State already beat Oklahoma once. So I guess that means that Oklahoma State would have to win the next 2 games and Texas would have to win the next 2 games. But it's still possible, right? We're still mathematically in the building, so anything can happen. And you love to see the Texas baseball team dominate on all cylinders, and that's what happened in the first game over West Virginia, 12-2. They led 11-0, right? They were on the verge of a shutout before giving up runs in the 8th and the 9th, and we've talked about that being an issue that hasn't arisen for this Texas baseball team over the last month, starting with that Baylor series. And once again, even though it didn't matter, it didn't come back to bite you, it didn't threaten you at all, you gave up 2 runs in the 8th and the 9th, right? That's when the back end of your bullpen is supposed to come in. That's when your closer is supposed to come in. You're supposed to just shut them down, right? And that has not been the case for the last month for this Texas baseball team. I'm hoping that that's something that doesn't come back to bite them in postseason play. When you look at downtown Porter Brown, he had 3 homers yesterday by the 7th inning, 8 RBIs overall out of the 12 runs scored. And you look at the offense, they had 12 hits and 4 walks. So did a really good job in terms of hitting home runs. And I love to say with the walks and the singles, putting together really good at-bats, passing the baton. When you talk about pitching, Lucas Gordon, who has been great all year, gave you a quality start, gave you a super quality start, really. 7 innings pitched, 0 earned runs, 8 strikeouts, 10 strikeouts on the day period for the Texas pitching staff. So I really liked what I saw from this Texas baseball team. The only quarrel I would have is that you gave up 2 runs in the 8th and the 9th inning, but it did not affect the score really at all. Didn't put pressure on the Texas baseball team really at all. And tonight you have a chance to clinch the series, not sweep the series, but clinch the series at 6:30 with LBJ on the mound. So hopefully it's a good weekend for the Texas baseball team, and hopefully we get some good news in terms of where we'll be playing in postseason play. Gosh, can you tell it's Friday and I'm ready for the weekend? Hope y'all are too. Hook 'em.